the hot topic is why some runners are dying after they participate in a marathon.
Honestly, Lexi, I would never be able to participate in a marathon. For one thing, I would hate running. And to run 26-something miles for hours and hours, gosh, I would die.
Right, and speaking of dying, no lighthearted humor intended. That's the problem. People are dying after they run.
So what's going on?
Marathons have been scattered throughout the years, but recently the International Marathon Medical Directors Association have been drilled with concerns on an increase in deaths in marathons throughout the months.
Yes, and here's the interesting part. After some investigation, not some, but all of the deceased runners in various marathons suffered from the same fate. With no signs of performance-enhancing drug use, the runners still complained of severe vomiting and confusion before falling into a coma and dying.
Obviously, this isn't just a coincidence. So with this reporting, do we have a solution to this odd happening?
Yes, we do. Let's check it with our other news anchor, Dana, and see what she has to say.
Hello there, Lexi, Rachel, and fellow viewers. With me is Breaking News Network's very own health specialist, Allison, to help us understand what exactly happened to the deceased runners during the marathons. So let's get right into this. Allison, how would you explain the deaths of these runners?
Well, what happened to the runners isn't just one cause, so let me explain this little by little. First of all, I'd like to say that the source of all the deaths is because of two things. One of them is water, specifically distilled water. As many people know, throughout a marathon there are several stations throughout the race handing out water to the runners, and that is where the problems start.
That's the problem? Can you explain why? Most people think that it only helps the runners.
I will get to that, but first let me show you all some charts.
Well, it's obvious that some marathons, like the IMG New York City Marathon, have a lot more participants than other marathons, like the Rock and Roll Arizona Marathon.
It is the number of participants that affect the number of people dying at each marathon. For example, would the IMG New York City Marathon have more dying people because they have more participants?
Actually, the number of participants do not affect the number of deaths at each marathon at all. Take a look at the next chart. This chart shows deaths at each marathon this year.
The Rock and Roll Arizona Marathon seems to have the most deaths, at 4, while the IMG New York City Marathon has only 1, even if the IMG New York City Marathon has way more participants than the Rock and Roll Arizona Marathon.
So, a factor in the deaths must be something else. I wonder, does it have something to do with temperature?
Oh, it does, doesn't it? If you look at the chart, the Rock and Roll Arizona Marathon has the highest temperature out of all the marathons, and I'm sure it is no coincidence because the Rock and Roll Arizona Marathon has the most deaths.
Correct. If you look at the 3 marathons with the most deaths, Disney, Rock and Roll Arizona, and Houston, you can also note that these 3 marathons have the highest temperatures.
Are the runners dying from dehydration?
Wait, dehydration shouldn't be the problem, because according to this chart, the runners' water levels are increasing.
It seems like the runners' water levels are shooting much higher than they should be after running the marathon. It says here that the normal body water level should be 40 to 50 liters, but runners, like runner number 1, have water levels well above this range.
Hot weather, too much water.
Do the runners' deaths have to do with too much water and sweating?
In fact, it does. It's not just the water that the runners are dying from, but sweat as well. See, people sweat to maintain homeostasis. Homeostasis is the maintenance of a constant internal environment despite external conditions. An example of homeostasis is sweating, because we sweat in order to maintain a body temperature of 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Whether it's 27 degrees out or 103 degrees out, the body will still try to work to remain at its normal temperature of 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. However, the hotter it is, the harder it is to maintain homeostasis. So, as you deduced, the hotter it is ties into more deaths.
So, we know that sweating buckets in heating weather leads to more deaths. But is there something more to it? It seems like the decreasing sodium levels are significant too, because the deceased runners' sodium levels are well below the normal range of 136 to 145.
Well, if my memory serves me correctly, sweat is not only made of water, but also of sodium. So when you sweat, you lose not only water, but sodium. So the issues leading to the runner's deaths have something to do with sweating excessively, consuming too much water, and losing too much salt.
And all these factors lead to vomiting, confusion, coma, and death.
For the confusion and nausea, this is caused by a lack of sodium in the body. Sodium, you see, is made up of ions, Na+1 and Cl-1. Ions produce electricity, which helps the brain send commands throughout the body. Less sodium yields less ions, which yields a slower pace of electricity, and this unnatural change causes dizziness, confusion, nausea, and vomiting, because commands from the brain are moving a lot slower than the brain should be sending. Now the water. The runners have too much water because the water that they consume at the marathons is distilled water. This means that the runners are taking in water, but they are not taking in any salt to replace that in the sweat that they lost. Since distilled water contains only water, this water would be a rather unbalanced solution with no ions or other particles that cells can take in. Then the percentage of water is higher in the solution than the percentage of water in the cells. Since this is unbalanced, the cells will try to maintain homeostasis to try to reach an equilibrium, or an equal distribution of a substance across a space. There are two forms of cellular transport in order to maintain homeostasis: active transport and passive transport. Sodium moves in the cells through passive transport through ion channels in the cell because sodium is an ion. Ion channels move medium-sized particles to and from the cell, moving down a concentration gradient, which is an unequal distribution of a substance across a space. Water moves in naturally in a form of passive transport called osmosis. Osmosis requires no energy, and it moves water from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. As said before, the percentage of water is higher in the solution than the percentage of water in the cells. So, the water will move into the cell because of osmosis. However, since the solution is just water, it has no solute, making it a hypotonic solution. A hypotonic solution means that the water will move into the cell, causing the cell to gain water and swell to the point of bursting. So, this means that the cells in the runners will swell, including the cells in the brain. When the cells in the brain swell too much, that is what causes a coma and can eventually cause death.
Thank you, Allison. So here we have it. Now that we have this solution, we advise future marathon runners to make sure to take in both enough water and enough sodium.
So viewers, how can we make sure that we can take in enough water and enough sodium?
It can be as simple as eating in addition to drinking. For example, besides drinking water, a runner can munch on some salty pretzels to take in their sodium and ions.
Another solution is the popular drink, Gatorade. Made just for the purpose of providing ions in addition to water. Gatorade can provide both the necessary ions and water to those who need it.
Thanks for tuning in, viewers. Don't forget to take in those water and ions. You could save yourself from death.
What?
I guess they should have had a Gatorade. This report is brought to you by Gatorade, an easy way to take in the ions that you need.
Honestly, Lexi, I would never be able to participate. Honestly, Lexi, I would never be able to participate in a marathon.
With me is Breaking News Network's very own health specialist.
Wait, I'm running
Go! 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 Read your line! Dana, read your line. Lexi, run.
That's the problem.